In your words, how would you define a millennial right now?
How would you, on the way to becoming a boomer, that's how I feel like a lot of our... It puts you in a box and it says like, hey, you are an old person, so you watch old people content. Once you get into that box, it's very hard to get out. They want to be cool and have their own language. So if you're an old person and you take their young cool language...
Yeah, it's a generational misappropriation. Aaron, welcome to the show.
Hi guys, thanks for having me on the show.
Welcome back, bro. Today we're going to talk about Gen Zs and engaging with them.
Yes.
Maybe let's understand a little bit more yourself and how come we're talking to you about this topic today.
Targeting Gen Zs and creating content for Gen Z was something that I was doing in my last workplace at SGAG. So there was definitely a direction and strategy to reach out to younger audiences, especially as we started building up our TikTok platform. And because there was a large group of Gen Zs there, we had to come up with strategies and figure out how we actually want to target them. And of course, working in the creative field, producing content, a lot of the people that I work with were Gen Z. I would definitely not say that I'm an expert on Gen Z, but I have had experience working with them and trying to create content that resonates with them.
It's actually great that we're talking to you because some of our listeners here are actually not in the Gen Z space, or they're not just themselves.
On this podcast right now, we have two millennials, one Gen X,
right?
Pseudo wannabe millennial, using words that probably y'all don't think are cool.
Please, guys, you don't say any slangs, okay? Because I think the Gen Zs will just turn off the podcast now.
Yeah. Oh no.
When you did YouTube and Three Potatoes,
yep.
Out of then younger generations, I'm pretty sure they're a bit different than they are from them now. So maybe let's start off with definition-wise. Let's define the generations if we can, as far back as you can figure them out.
As in their characteristics?
Okay, let's put a star here, okay? We're not trying to stereotype anybody, okay? No stereotyping here, but it's generally.
Okay, so the boomers, our parents, our millennials,
yes.
parents, so we're talking
Who
about
are trying to figure out words with friends. That's a social platform.
Very good. Perfect explanation. And then next we have the Gen X.
Gen X, right.
We have one over here.
The forgotten.
We're still on Facebook. Hi.
In your words, how would you define a millennial right now?
How would you... On the way to becoming a boomer, that's how I feel like a lot of our... I kid you not, there's so many millennials nowadays, right? I'm like, guys, we were supposed to be better than this. We've become the very thing that we've hated. But
yeah, you're supposed to take over the world. You believe in yourself, you can be president one day.
Exactly.
Oh, this is so true, bro.
I hate to have that take, but sometimes it is what it is.
We just have to be honest with ourselves sometimes, so it's okay. And then now the Gen Zs, right?
Yeah.
They are the 1993, I think.
The oldest Gen Z now is 27 or 28, is it? Somewhere.
Gen Zs, the Gen Zs, yeah, I think so.
Yeah, they're just entering the workforce right now. Millennials right now are becoming managers of the Gen Zs.
Yes.
Yeah.
Gen Xers like us, okay, we haven't figured out what we want to do. We just work hard, right? And hopefully someone likes us.
What do you think are the key values and behaviors of the Gen Zs now that, especially if you're in the marketing industry, what do we need to take note of about this Gen Z?
I think there's a couple of things that are quite common amongst Gen Zs. I don't like to stereotype an entire generation, but there are certain things that they grew up with and that they see differently. So I think one of the things is that they're digital natives. This term is thrown around a lot. And what does it mean, to be digital savvy? I think they interact a lot more with social media. But the fact that they interact a lot more with social media also means that they're a lot more resistant to the usual hard sell and the usual smoke and mirrors. They're looking for authenticity. Gen Z is also not buying into the whole idea of if I work hard and I hustle hard, that's going to mean my life is going to be great. They're instead looking for purpose in the things that they do. So I think that's something that a lot of brands have really leveraged on nowadays. So I think if you look at brands that focus on sustainability, brands that focus on diversity, inclusion, these are brands that are doing well because their purpose is resonating with Gen Z.
Not to say they don't work hard either, right? Because if they find that purpose and find that meaning in the world, they are very driven.
So the brands are looking to sell something to them. They have to also represent that purpose in the things that they do, both internally and externally.
Plant that flag, say this is what I stand for, this is what I stand against, and be really clear about that.
Yeah, for sure. I think if you want to be a brand that sells to Gen Z, like having a strong purpose that people can see, both like that you talk about and that you show, right? And the actions that you take is very important.
Can you recall a moment when in either of the roles, whether be it now you're on your own or in SGAG, where it was like, oh my God, the difference becomes so obvious?
I guess the easiest one for me is like in work culture, right? I think Gen Z, they're just entering the workforce. They have very different ideas of interaction, like with their managers and things like that. And I also think part of it is like with millennials. As millennials become managers, they're no longer the same as how our like boomer managers were like, you know, I mean,
expectations are different.
Yeah, I remember when I was 20 years old, I had a manager who came up to one of my colleagues and he asked my colleague like, hey, how long have you been with your girlfriend? And the guy said like 3 years. And the manager replied, oh, 3 years already, time to change new girlfriend. I was like, you know, I mean, stuff like that. If you said that in the office today, you'd be like, cancel. Like, instantly. So, I mean, you know, values have changed, mindsets have changed. Gen Z definitely are very different when they're in the office space. I think they're a lot more direct. They aren't afraid to like express their displeasure because they're working for purpose and they're not just working for money. That means that they are a lot more open to like leaving a place if it doesn't match their values and their purpose. They're not just going to stick around because, hey, I need to be employed and I need this money. To them, there are lots of different opportunities and purpose is important for them.
I think that's very challenging for SMEs nowadays also when they're hiring.
I think expectations are definitely different, like in terms of just recently about the whole flexible work arrangement thing, right? There was a huge pushback from SMEs about implementing some of those in their companies. And how would a company like then attract a Gen Z workforce kind of like believe in what they're doing? Not that they don't have their values or they don't have clear mission statement or things like that, but how do they make themselves heard in the Gen Z space?
I really think it boils down to purpose though. Like I think if your company has like a strong purpose, like, you know, maybe you want to be like the most successful environmentally sustainable fashion brand, or you know, you want to be creating tech products that help creatives, and that's your goal and your purpose. If you really abide by the purpose that you state you're out to do, and you're not just there doing a business just purely for money, I think Gen Zs will be able to hear that and sense that. Like, I mean, you can shout it out on social media, but I mean, and you can even write it on like LinkedIn, but people
just
don't
believe,
believe,
it comes out of being inauthentic. I'm trying to do something, and then there's the whole greenwashing conversation.
So I bring back to the YouTube days, right? So when you were in YouTube doing marketing work for your clients, and then also then more recently at SGAG doing marketing for clients, at the time where you were working with 20-plus-year-olds, right? How different is it now?
Wow, very, very, very different. So I mean, first of all, when I was in my YouTube days, I was the 20-year-old. So back to that, I mean, with YouTube, I knew what was up. I was one of the main creatives. I was the creative driving force, and that was also one of the issues with like running a small team, right? I'm the primary creative driving force. Like without me, it was hard to sustain. So it was a very different way of doing things. And then in SGAG, I'm now like head of video and I'm managing a team of creatives. So it's a totally different ball game. And my way of running a creative team is that I feel that as the head of a creative team, you don't necessarily have to be the most creative person in the room. And in fact, sometimes when it comes to social media, you have to let go of some control and really trust the people who are way more into the content, you know. I think one example of this is like just the TikTok algorithm that is being served to you. Like one thing that I like to do with my team was that I'll watch what's on my FYP and I'll compare it to like what my team is getting and see like how far off am I from getting the content that they're consuming, because TikTok is kind of like an echo chamber, right? It puts you in a box and it says like, hey, you are an old person, so you watch old people content. And once you get into that, you know, that box is very hard to get out. So you have to consciously make an effort to step out of your comfort zone and go like, what are you guys watching? And you'll be very surprised. Like once you start watching what Gen Z is watching, right, you'll be like, what on earth is going on here? Like I can't understand a single word. All this jargon is going to come out and you have to really like deep dive and understand that.
I think building on that, if you don't have a young creative team, you can also like, your niece, your nephew who are in that space. Hey, can you send me some, what's kind of trending now? Be the awkward uncle for a little bit lah. And then ask them, what's up now? What's up?
I am the awkward uncle. I was just saying, I'm just stepping into the awkward uncle. But although my niece still calls me the funkle, so I
oh, nice. Nice.
I got stripes. The Funko.
Are there any specific tactics that you use to figure out engaging content for Gen Zs?
Definitely, we try to study the kind of content that they're watching, the lingo, the memes. There's tons of like TikTok memes and lingo that only like Gen Zs would know about, and so it's very important to like do your research and understand these and understand the context of why they're popular. Because I think a lot of the times brands will just be like, hey, this lingo is what Gen Z is using, we're going to use it in our ad.
So they just copy that without understanding
Exactly.
How it came to be, right?
What is the context, right?
Yeah.
Like, so I mean, if you ask yourself, like, why does any young generation have like all this lingo that they come out on their own? It's because they're being tribal and they're trying to come up with their own like words and terms to separate themselves from old people. They want to be cool and have their own language. So if you're an old person and you take their young cool language and you use it, in a way you make it no longer cool.
Yeah, it's a generational misappropriation. If I can call
that's a
new word.
Yeah, that's the thing, right? I think some seniors may I say seniors. I'm so sorry.
Oh, let's go.
No, because it recently was a bit viral when you see their parents trying to say like
oh, that was funny.
slay and whatnot, and the kids were like, "Come on!" But the context is, you're right. They're trying to stand out from being different a little bit, right? So let them be them. Let them be them. Don't have to force yourself to follow the trend. It can end up being cringe, and then your Gen Z audience will start to stay away from you. Yeah.
Right, unless your purpose is like being cringe. I mean, like that video.
True.
That video, the whole idea behind
That's
that
true.
video was to be a cringe. Yeah.
It could be a marketing strategy on its own, a marketing thing. Was there a recent campaign that you did recently that was specifically targeted at Gen Z and that became really successful?
Specifically targeted at Gen Z, I would say not really. In fact, I would say that most brands, at least that the ones that we were working with or that I've worked with, they don't generally specifically only target Gen Z. Because Gen Z's buying habits, their disposable income is not as large as like the millennials. Like the millennials are still seen as the cash cows.
Right.
And the purchasing habits are different as well. Of course, there are products like targeted at Gen Z. In fact, most of the time, my recommendation, if you're doing like products directly aimed at Gen Z, then influencers are a pretty good way to target them as well. I mean, because they care about like authenticity and purpose, and having an individual talk about those is better than like having a brand talk about those. I mean, back to your question, there have been like campaigns where we're targeting a wider spectrum, including younger people, and the ones that work for us, off the top of my head, I think one of the Vox Pop series that we did where we're on the ground like talking to people, I think that resonates really well with our Gen Z audiences, because I mean, like I said, they're about authenticity, they're about hearing the voice, and so when you do a Vox Pop, you're like kind of capturing people's authentic self on the spot. You're not like, it's unfiltered lah. And they can tell, and Gen Z is smart enough to know when like you're doing a Vox Pop and it's like it's not like those old school Colgate ads where they ask like the doctor and the doctor goes like, hey, this Colgate is
planted planted.
It's an actual Vox Pop where you're like really talking to real authentic individuals. Then there's an appreciation for that from Gen Z viewers.
In case you don't know what Vox Pop is, I'm gonna put it on the screen now. You can tell you what's the Vox Pop. Okay,
Vox Popular.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't know. I'm so sorry.
Oh, Vox Pops are just like voice of the people. So that means like going on the streets and like interviewing people. Sorry, street interviews.
You've probably seen it, but you don't know what it's called.
Is the one that Prison Plus did and they smashed the...
Ish. They have some, right? I think.
But it's more of like I go on Orchard Road and I ask you a question, then you talk to me. Then it's like where you get 10 rejections and you finally get one person talk to you.
Yes. It's a trial and it's a real trial and tribulation getting people. Yeah, I've done like Vox Pops by myself. It's tough. You gotta approach random strangers, and then most Singaporeans are like quite conservative, so they don't want to talk. But to be fair, I think Gen Z is a lot more open. Because they are digital natives, right? They're a lot more comfortable in front of camera. Like for them, they've been born
with the camera in their face.
Yeah, all the millennial parents already going like like smile at the camera. Like,
I'm sorry to my girls. I'm so sorry.
Yeah. You're transforming her into a mini
influencer. Should be doing like toy reviews before long.
Should be selling on
TikTok
Live.
money there, okay. Money, okay.
There is.
You should monetize your children.
Monetize your.
This sounds so bad.
So bad. Talking about influencers, right? You mentioned about working with influencers now, and that's a good strategy for Gen Zs. So, maybe some experiences you had, like when did it backfire? When did it work with working with influencers?
Right. So like I said, like Gen Z, they're very savvy when it comes to like marketing. So if you pick some influencer and you just pick them because they had a big following and not because they actually resonate with your brand, they're gonna smell it. Like easy example is when an influencer talks about a phone and then they don't use the phone. Like, hey, if you're gonna give this influencer and ask them to say how great your phone brand is, like say for example, you tell them like, hey, Samsung finds an influencer, and then this influencer goes like, oh, I love Samsung, Samsung's the best, and then people spot this guy out there, yeah,
iPhone,
yeah, basically running around with his iPhone, or worse still, and there's been cases like this where the person sells the phone after they do the ad,
no.
you know. So like Gen Z sees that inauthenticity and they go like, look, this is nonsense. Like you're selling me a lie. And so I think the key thing to look out for when you're working with influencers is you got to find people who resonate with your brand. You don't just find people because they have a big following.
Right. What I'm hearing is you find a consistent thread where you can leverage the influencers on that's consistent with your brand, not like you adjust your brand messaging to fit that influencer, what you're trying to do or what's trending. Find areas of commonality where you can leverage what your brand has always been saying and continue to say, but using a different medium or a different way of doing it, like your Vox Pop or something like that.
Yeah. I mean, if it's like an eco-friendly brand, then you want to find somebody who actually embodies that, who cares about like, you know, eco-friendly, sustainable businesses. If you're a fashion brand and maybe you're a local fashion brand, then you want to find somebody who cares about local fashion, right? So these are important things that really help to like get you the most bang for your buck. Because if you get an influencer who has like nothing to do with your brand but has a lot of views, then you get eyeballs, but the quality of the, you know, these engagements is low.
So then building on that, right, what's your take? A big one-time influencer with hundreds of thousands of followers opposed to maybe 1,000 micro nano influencers.
Right.
What's your take on this?
Each one has its pros and cons, right? I mean, again, if this big influencer really resonates with your brand and they love it and they're gonna like really pour their heart and soul into marketing it because they love it, then my goodness, why not? You know, nothing wrong with going that person. But a lot of the times, I would say probably you'll get more bang. I mean, in general, you might get more bang for your buck with the smaller influencers, just because like working with big influencers is so expensive. And most SMEs, I think if you're an SME watching this podcast, you probably wouldn't want to spend the amount of money that you'd have to on a big influencer. But hey, you know, sometimes, you know, big influencers, they're people too. They have things that they like, they have hobbies that they like, and they might be willing to work with you if it's a product that they really enjoy, right? That's a way that you can like try to work with a big influencer. You really try to understand what they like and see if you can approach them from that angle. That might be a good way.
Have you experienced having difficulty in getting a product to a certain influencer?
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, especially if you're talking about like giving them the product for free and then expecting them to like
exactly.
with it. Yeah. I mean, most of the big influencers, I mean, they're doing it for a living, right? So they're not gonna create content for you for free, lah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But micro influencers, they typically will because they are looking to expand their portfolio. They're looking to like network. Of course, they don't have the same reach, lah. So that's why I said pros and cons from working with each one.
Yeah, because I mean, I'm not gonna judge them, lah, right? But I'm sure they will be selective on what they want to promote and what they want to choose. Because again, what they promote represents them also, their brand, their purpose also, right? So they wouldn't want to show them something that is not them.
Okay, so we talked a little bit about influencers, but how is a brand supposed to find the right kind of influencers that will resonate with the audience? Is there a specific tactic that you would use?
Yeah, so I think the lowest hanging fruit here is really trying to follow your own followers, checking out who they are watching and who they are following, and then from there you can see like what they're interacting with, right? Whether it's other brands or it's certain influencers, and then those are the kind of people and communities that you want to engage with to reach your target audience.
And the KOLs they are following, then those are the KOLs you might want to work with also, right?
Yeah. So basically you just go down a rabbit hole, follow the followers and follow the followers. And
exactly.
Yeah, I remember this story of like there was this brand, can't remember Australia, US, but it's a bikini brand, and then they really wanted to reach out to one of the Kardashian sisters. They tried their hardest, but for some reason they just couldn't get the product to her. So they did this really brilliant strategy of they went to who is she following, and they basically gave their products free to all the people she was following. So suddenly it became like a whole circle has the bikini. Then she was like, why do I not have this bikini? What's happening? Why is everybody of you have and I do not have? So FOMO, right? So the Kardashian sister, she reached out to the brand and said, hey, why do I not have some? Send me some. I would then do a promotion for you, right? So and then it worked out, and obviously now they're really popular. I remember this came on the feed, so I thought that's a really interesting strategy as well.
Yeah, creating FOMO, I think, is a real thing. Yeah.
So
what you're trying to do is just do a bait and switch, put the product you're trying to, get in front of the influencer by just surrounding her with all this thing. Right? Basically, you're flooding her feed, right? Flooding her feed.
You are literally
flooding her feed with FOMO. I'll try to say that 5 times fast.
Okay, so you worked in a huge company like SGAG, right? Which I'm sure they had different generations working all in one big organization and in one team, from production to KOLs, the talents themselves. So how is it managing different generations in a project or the campaign, for example?
It is tough. I mean, there's very different expectations on how things work and how people should work. I mean, just from a work standpoint, work culture is really different between like millennials and older and then Gen Z. At SGAG, of course, I think the oldest we had was millennials. We didn't have any Gen X or
not even in finance or HR.
No, everybody is very young. I was like one of the oldest people.
No wonder they call you uncle.
I was one of the oldest people in the company. So yeah, I mean, there's definitely a difference in working style that you need to establish, and you kind of have to figure out like which one works better for you. That's more contextual. I don't think I have any like particular advice on that other than like making sure that you establish a uniform way of working for both sides. In terms of like from the content standpoint, like obviously the millennials and the Gen Zs like had very different like creative ideas of what works and what doesn't work. So part of how we thought about it was like we try to understand like who's the target audience for a particular campaign, and then if there's like a specific target audience that I know like, okay, the Gen Zs in my team, they might write better for this kind of content, then I would really place them on it, and I'll put them as the key decision makers for that piece of content.
I see.
Yeah.
So you see the project and then you fit accordingly.
Yeah, definitely. Because the ideas are very different. I mean, it's same as we're working with directors, right? If you have a video production house and you have like different projects, the differences among directors is the same that you would have amongst like different generations.
It's not a one size fits all kind of thing.
Yeah,
right?
no.
Sure.
I like how you brought up that all social media is really contextual. There's no one right answer for any of the things that we're actually talking about here right now so far.
Yes.
And all we are really trying to do is just give some general guidelines that the large community of business owners can follow. So like, give me a strategy that all business owners can follow. Not going to happen, and not a reasonable expectation either. So I think keep in mind that these are all kind of like guiding principles we're sharing here.
Now we're talking about Gen Z so much, right? There are like so many platforms now. We have TikTok, we have Instagram, and then we have even things like Lemonade, Xiaohongshu, all those, right? What do you think particularly takes to the Gen Zs a bit more? Is it really just TikTok, or it's more than just that?
The thing is that the Gen Zs are actually much more varied than a lot of people would like to think. Sometimes I feel like people tend to treat like the entire generation as this one homogeneous beast. But if you think about it, actually Gen Z is one of the most varied in a way because of how much content they can get and they have access to. Like subcultures are now more accessible than ever before. If you think about it, in our time, say like I enjoy some sport that is not very common. I've like basically no way to find my people, my social group for that sport. Or maybe I'm like into Dungeons and Dragons. It's a geeky game, right? And then I can't find anyone else who is into that. But now with how prevalent social media is, everybody can find their specific niche. And that allows a lot more diversity in people, right? I know Gen Zs who don't have TikTok. Like, it exists. Yeah. It's not like, hey, if you're Gen Z, you'll definitely have TikTok and you will say all these words.
Yeah, ultimately, I get what you're going for, right? I mean, like, they will find the tribe wherever they can be found. And if most of the tribe are going to hang out like on Reddit, that's the social media platform they're going to be
on. Exactly. So it's hard to say like, is there one? I mean, of course, like if you want to look at like big numbers, there will probably be one that has the most Gen Zs, most likely TikTok. But if you're just going to use that, I don't think it's a sound strategy for your business, because maybe your business is catering to Gen Zs who don't go on TikTok. Maybe for some weird reason you're talking to a particular type of Gen Z that only goes on Reddit. Then you shouldn't be on TikTok.
Yeah. With the limited number of resources that SME owners have, you have one asset, which is the vertical video. What are the top 3 platforms you would recommend so that you can reach Gen Zs or their market area, if you're trying to reach Gen Zs?
I mean, I would pick two Instagram and TikTok, definitely the two platforms that you have to be on. Whether you're on like YouTube Shorts or not, at this moment, it's not that big. like other things like Lemonade and all that. Those are not favoring video as much. It's a little bit more like pictures and like experiences and writing. So for me, Instagram and TikTok are definitely like the two places that I would invest my energy in. If you feel like video content is what I am doing and my audiences exist on those platforms, you gotta ask yourself first, like, is my audience on this platform and is this the best way for me to speak to them?
It may not be for everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah. You can do that through audience surveys. Actually ask your customers, like, what are you hanging out on?
Exactly. You need to meet these people and understand them, right? You're not going to be able to understand your audience if you don't meet them, you don't talk to them, you don't engage with them.
So, generally speaking, you mentioned ESG is one of the values that are important for Gen Zs, right? But what in particular? If you want to focus your market or your messaging towards Gen Zs, what are the things that you tend to want to talk about?
Wow. Okay, there are lots of different ways that I've seen people approach it. I mean, some of it is like in transparency in the manufacturing process. Some of it is like transparency even in costs. It's about finding like what your company can actually do as well from a business standpoint, and then trying to get that message out there. Because I mean, not every company is going to be able to do all this stuff and remain like business viable. So you need to like really see like, okay, what efforts am I making, and then how do I tell people about these efforts?
That's right. So rather than just do something for the sake of doing it, you're actually focusing on like, it tends to land on transparency, honesty. What you say is actually what you do.
Yeah, I think you said it earlier, where it's like, first look at your product or your service, what you're trying to do. It's almost like whether they are Gen Z, whether they are whichever generation they are, it's about finding your tribe and then speaking to this tribe and then getting them involved in your tribe as a community and then building it around your product. Regardless of generation, I feel that's what probably still works. After all, regardless of generation, we are all human beings.
Exactly,
right?
yeah. I mean, Gen Z is not just Gen Z, right? I mean, there are students, there are some working adults, there's many other aspects of their personality that are not just Gen Z, right? Yeah,
you're right. Like we started earlier, they tend to get stereotyped, which is not right.
Yeah, you mentioned something cool too, like you got to treat them like humans.
Yeah. Just cut that, just clip that. The best way to work with Gen Z is treat them like humans.
I feel like the entire conversation is like Gen Zs are species of their own.
I feel like three old men trying to understand this mythical beast. The Gen Z, the wild Gen Z appears.
What has this podcast become? Any other really interesting stories you have dealt with in your recent days, like SGAG maybe, that was really funny to share or something like that?
I don't know if it's just my experience or the Gen Zs that I've met, but I've had some very interesting experiences. I've had a Gen Z who asked me how to resign from their job when I'm their boss. I'm like, how to write the letter of resignation.
When you are the boss.
When I'm the boss. And I just found this like hilarious. I was just like, you could Google that. You don't have to like come to me. So there are times like that, or
that sounds very authentic.
Or how to like apply for sick leave or things like that. Which are, I mean, it's funny, right? They're so digitally savvy, but at the same time, it's like, guys, how do you not know how to Google this? But maybe these are like, I don't know. I don't want to stereotype, lah. I don't want to stereotype. These could be outliers. Creative people we tend to hire more interesting people for. At least on my team, I like to get people who are a little bit different from the norm. It helps with like the creative process. I mean, if you want to create something really novel, you need to not think normally.
Yeah, that's true. In my work experience previously, so I used to work for a company that had a Gen X boss, right? Again, millennials become the manager, so I'm in the middle. And then I have teams that are Gen Zs, right? And it's like, while I could take the abuse, quote unquote abuse, or the, and we are here to work hard, I'll work hard, I'll work late, okay, good, that's how we get the job done. But it's almost like you can't treat the next generation the same way also, right? So they can't work the hours. And then we end up like losing our team. I was like, hey, boss, can you please not scold them anymore? Can you please not treat them like slave workers, please? Because if not, they're going to quit, and then I had to retrain and teach again. So I think this is also some experiences that a lot of us find as in.
I think that's shared because when I was in the workforce, I was an ex, right? I mean, I had to explain my boomer boss. You got to expect the millennials to just follow you. It's the same narrative,
Same narrative.
It's the same narrative. I mean, I think it all boils back down to like expecting the next generation to reflect the same values and expectations that you do and you have of yourself. And just like project it on them and expect it to be okay. I like that we shared a lot. A lot of it was focused on listening to them and trying to understand. And even though they're young or younger, to know that their opinions, their viewpoints have value and weight, and they just treat them like
this is the takeaway. This is the takeaway. It's the subtitle already. How to deal with Gen Zs, and it just says treat them like humans. They're human beings.
I mean,
We're gonna get so cancelled for this.
So cancelled. I mean, treat the viewpoints with respect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I agree.
Treat them with respect, treat them with dignity, and I found that whether it's I've hired millennials, X's, and Z's, right? If you treat them with respect, give them more responsibility, they will very often not disappoint you.
Yeah.
Very often, they will exceed your expectations.
Same. Yeah. Agree.
I agree.
Aaron, where can we follow you or find
Yeah,
you or
find
talk to you?
So my Instagram page, Aaron is Khoo. I have been creating fashion-related social media content there, both for my own interest and also for practice. But if you need any social media consultation advice, you can reach me there as well.
Thanks so much for sharing and opening up yourself, to talking about some of the stories that you've had, and all of us got a lot of value out of it. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Aaron.
you.
Good time.
It was a pleasure being on the show.